What are the chances that two separate individuals would take a series of 5 polygraph examinations and pass them all and yet be lying?
Here are the questions Dr. Edward Gelb asked John Ramsey on the polygraph about whether he was involved in the murder of his daughter.
Did you inflict any of the injuries that caused the death of John Benet? Answer, no. Regarding John Benet, did you inflict any of the injuries that caused her death? Answer, no. Were those injuries that resulted in John Benet's death inflicted by you? Answer, no. Based on the numerical scoring of the examinations in this series, Patsy Ramsey was telling the truth.
But she was also asked one other series of questions about the murder.
Did you write the ransom note that was found in your house? Answer, no. Regarding the ransom note, did you write it? Answer, no. Is that your handwriting on the ransom note found in your house? Answer, no. Conclusion. Patsy Ramsey was telling the truth.
It's interesting reading their facial expressions when these words are spoken at the press conference, especially Patsy sort of licking her lips right at the end there. And you can tell with the 3 yes or no questions that John was asked, all 3 questions were really different ways of asking the same question. So let me ask you, if you were to conduct these polygraphs, what questions would you ask?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into creatures, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I
fear. We have, as Lynn said, not 1 ounce of trust in the Boulder police, and that's sad. I wish that we did.
I think you have to know this case really well to prioritize, to know which questions to ask. And so how about less direct yes or no questions like, were you surprised to find John Benet in the basement wine cellar? Did you know she was already dead? And the questions for John would necessarily be very different, very distinct to the questions we would have for Patsy. Another one would be, do you think you know who killed John Benet? Did you purchase the book Mindhunter? Did you break the basement window on the day after Christmas? And for Patsy, have you ever tried to disguise your handwriting? Was the author of the ransom note trying to protect someone? Do you know who that is? Is it a bogus ransom note? Other yes or no questions they could have asked are, did you feed the kids pineapple? Did you hear a scream that night? Was John Benet sleeping in the car? Did John Benet go to bed early that night? Did you put her to bed? Did John Benet's bedwetting bother you at all?
What are the chances that two separate individuals would take a series of 5 polygraph examinations and pass them all?
Well, what matters here isn't so much what we think or even what the examiner himself thinks or what they thought at the press conference. What matters was what the authorities thought about these polygraph results. And what did they think? Well, they considered the Ramsey's polygraph results worthless. So if you say they took polygraphs and passed, you probably have to qualify that statement with this one, and this is from the New York Post. Colorado authorities who have kept the Ramseys under an umbrella of suspicion were quick to dismiss the significance of the test results. There is nothing today that is going to change where we are at in the investigation, said Boulder Police Chief Mark Beckner, who had demanded the couple submit to an FBI-administered test. Let me ask you, do you think the test that they did with this particular expert was as rigorous, as strict, as comprehensive, as tough as an FBI-administered test? What do you think? So just in a very general sense, do you think the Ramseys, for the lack of a better way of expressing it, took the easy way out or made things easier for themselves, or do you think they made things more challenging or difficult for themselves? Just a simple question like that. Now, on this question, if you say the Ramseys cooperated with the investigation, and here we are after the fact in March, April, May 2000, and the cops say, would you mind being tested by the FBI? Would you mind if we decide who you do the tests with? We would like you to be tested by the FBI. Do the Ramseys cooperate? Yes or no? Yes, they take polygraphs, but not the way the police have asked them to. And that's a very good way of dealing with a lot of these questions, is you can say, technically, yes, they did do X, Y, or Z. But in another sense, it's not the way that the authorities wanted them to do something. And that's then when you, I guess, choose which side you are on. If you agree that the Boulder police are discredited, then you're not on their side. If you feel that the Ramseys are not entirely believable, then that's your position. But I think it's important to take it a step further than that. In how many cases do you see suspects selecting their own experts? And also, what must be said in this is that the initial tests were inconclusive. That is sort of left out of this narrative. According to the same article, the Ramseys rejected that option because the FBI's worked closely with Boulder police and would have subjected them to an interrogation, Wood said. Well, what would be wrong with that? But hang on, also, I thought the FBI wasn't involved, and I thought the Ramseys wanted the FBI to be involved. So why not have the FBI involved with them?
Knowing what you know now, if you could change any part of the investigation after your daughter's death, what would it be, or what would you do differently?
I wish I would have demanded that more resources be brought to bear. We assumed the FBI was involved. They weren't. They were, in fact, refused involvement. We were told the FBI was on its way and it would be a couple hours. And of course, they never came. And if I will fault the Boulder Police for one thing, it's that they refused help in the beginning for people who knew what they were doing.
We understand that there was a request made that morning for bloodhounds, and it was denied by someone in the Boulder Police Department. I mean, that should have been done immediately.
Are you aware Denver police offered assistance?
Yes.
And they were refused.
It was Larry Mason who actually requested that the bloodhound be brought to the scene. And of course, it was Larry Mason who was one of the first Boulder PD officers who was fired. Anyone know why he was fired? And by the way, Larry Mason actually attended the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. He was one of the few Boulder PD cops who had done so, taken off the investigation. It was also Larry Mason who apparently said to John, when he was calling his pilot, you can't leave. We've got unfinished business here. You can't postpone that kind of thing. You can't fly out of Boulder. It was Larry Mason who said, guys, can you go to the Holiday Inn? And they said, no, we're going to go to the Fernies. It was also Larry Mason who objected to Commander Eller trying to basically ransom the body, basically saying, we're going to hold John Bonet's body and force the Ramseys to talk to us, and only once they do will we give them their body for burial. And it was Larry Mason who said, you can't do that. Commander Eller ultimately accused Larry Mason of leaking to CNN the fact that the Ramseys had agreed to an interview with the Boulder police, and he would later be fired for this, and it would take about a year for Larry Mason to be exonerated on this charge. Of course, by then he was off the investigation and the whole Ramsey circus had moved on.
Retired FBI agent Ron Walker says the FBI is called in.
Coming back to the polygraphs, the Ramseys were quizzed by Gelb 3 times this month. The couple invited the FBI to examine the testing methods and results, but seemed to rule out further polygraphs. So, although they're saying, check what we did, they also seem, it's implied that they're not really prepared to go any further than they already have. What's next? John Ramsey snapped. A bed of coals you want us to walk across? Now look at the date of this article from the New York Post, May 25th. Barbara Walters brought up the question on March 17th. How and why did it take more than 2 months to conduct and pass the test? You may remember Chris Watts was asked on the night of August 14th if he would take a lie detector.
You know that we have to get to the bottom of this. Would you take a polygraph? Sure.
They had made arrangements for him to come back the next morning and submit to a polygraph exam.
That's how quickly a polygraph can be arranged overnight. And sure as nuts, Watts pitched up, sat down. the goof got himself wired up and he took the polygraph.
Just make sure you don't move, okay?
So right before the polygraph, I tell Chris,
Right now, there's only one person in this room that knows what the truth is. And in about 5 minutes, there's going to be 2 of us. So that's the coolest part.
we call it snapping a knot in their ass, because that's what we do right before the polygraph, because we want them to know it's over.
Do you think Gelb would have done something like that, used some of these techniques to actually get the anxiety levels up with the Ramseys in order to, if the person is lying, to make absolutely sure that that is shown? Do you think the test would be as rigorous if they weren't conducted by the FBI or the CBI? And we all know what happened. Watts took a polygraph the very next morning on August 15th, and within minutes, they knew that same day whether he had passed or failed.
Whatever you're saying is, you better be truthful or we're going to find out.
All right, you ready?
Do it.
Okay, stay still. Do you know where Shanann is now?
No.
Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance?
No.
Are you lying about the last time you saw Shanann?
No.
You can tell those three questions that Watts has asked are all very different. Some have to do with her disappearance, some have to do with harming his family, and one has to do with guilty knowledge. That one is a lot more vague and also broad. Whereas the questions the Ramseys were asked seem to be incredibly narrow.
We would consider someone to be deceptive if they were a -4 and below. Chris Watts scored -18.
Well, how about a case besides the Chris Watts case? Well, from the Coronado Times, News 8 has obtained video of the polygraph examination of Adam Shacknai, recorded about 12 hours after he called 911 to report findings of Howe's body. 12 hours later. That's how quickly this can take place. And some of you may know I've written 2 books on the Rebecca Zahau murder.
Itself only involves 10 yes or no questions.
Do you know for sure if anyone did anything to her that resulted in her death?
No. Veteran police interrogator Paul Redden also asked Shacknai what happened.
So I went around the back into the house, which the door was open. I got a knife from their butcher block thing, came back out, cut her down.
Now, some people might say that a polygraph is junk science, but the fact is the Ramseys did sit down to be tested. To me, the value of it isn't so much in the test itself, but in the availability, the willingness that someone shows to take the test. And with Chris Watts, he seems very willing, which is in his favor, but of course the test itself isn't. With the Ramseys, you have quite a different situation. They ultimately pass the test, but the degree of how long it takes for this test to actually take place is certainly quite interesting. So in the Adam Shacknai test, that involved 10 yes or no questions asked over and over again by veteran police interrogator and polygrapher Paul Redden. According to Redden, the results were inconclusive. So what do you think? Does inconclusive mean not guilty? Does inconclusive mean that Shacknai in this case wasn't necessarily lying, and even if there was a little bit of deception, it doesn't really prove anything, right?
Adam Shacknai came into the courtroom dressed casually and then spoke confidently outside just one day after jurors found him responsible for the death of Rebecca Zahau. His lawyers say it came as a shock, but this isn't over.
If it took the CBI a day to set up the polygraph in the Watts case, and FYI, this is the same state, mind you, Colorado, where the Ramsey case occurred, why did it take the Ramseys more than 2 months? And why did they set conditions? And why didn't they pass the first one with flying colors? Why? And are you aware of that the Ramseys didn't pass the first test that they did with a different polygrapher? And so for me, the interesting insight is how the narrative is framed. We took a polygraph, we passed, and he has a press conference showing just how obvious it is that we are innocent. But the bottom line is it wasn't as simple as that. That they seem to want to select their own polygraphers rather than those the FBI, that the cops wanted to test the Ramseys. at the press conference where the Ramseys were promoting how they passed their polygraphs with flying colors, a journalist queried why the FBI didn't do the questioning and whether the questions were too soft. Well, just so.
I don't think so.
Listen,
what's next? What's next? A bed of coals? You want us to walk across?
It's on videotape. It is, you know, they can review this.
Let's take
They'd
the
like.
question or the statement. These questions are soft. What would you ask?
What do you think? Is that a legitimate or unfair question?
Soft? What would you ask?
Well, I'm not an FBI expert.
Right, but what would you ask?
I think you asked the same question in a couple of different ways.
Three different times in one test.
There would be
But why are you asking the same question in three different ways? That's how I understand it, especially the questions posed to Patsy.
more in-depth questions, harder questions.
What's the bottom line here? The bottom line is, did you inflict the injuries that caused the death of John Bonet? The bottom line.
I'm not sure if that is the bottom line. I think you've got to think about this case in a slightly different way. And again, if you have an awareness of what the grand jury thought, well, then the answer to those questions about did you inflict these particular injuries are irrelevant to John and Patsy. So what I think is interesting is even the Ramsey's own apologists acknowledge in this press conference that Patsy needed to be asked about the ransom note because she hadn't been excluded as the author. And Patsy put herself in that position as well because she seemed to recognize that this was something that needed to be addressed because she hadn't been excluded as the author of the ransom note. And isn't it interesting that the polygraph, like the handwriting analysis, was inconclusive, at least to begin with? Another reporter, it sounds like Carol McKinley, asks, why not ask questions by someone familiar with the investigation?
Are you continuing? Where are you going?
Dr. Delta Boulder police are saying that they want someone who is familiar with the investigation. They would ask questions like, do you know what weapon caused the head wound? Something like that might kill people off guard. That's why they want someone who knows the case. You obviously have no case.
Well,
that would be an incompetent test.
Did you catch that? Do you know what weapon caused the head wound? Is that a fair question?
Questions or the did you questions. Now, the worst thing you can do is to put a secondary involvement question in that test series because they may not feel comfortable with that secondary involvement question, and that will kill the responses to the comparison questions which we depend upon to get our numerical scores.
Well, that's nice. So you can conduct a polygraph, but you can't ask any questions really about what do they refer to it as secondary involvement. So you can't ask any questions really about being an accessory, but you could ask a question that infers that, such as, do you know who the killer is? So do you see, it's did you kill John Bonet, but not did you help someone who did? And is that fair? Or are you going to get to the truth, not asking some of those questions? What do you think? So let me know in the comments, what questions would you pose if you held a polygraph? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. If you found this particular research and analysis interesting, please do hit the thanks button, and I'll see you guys next time.